Morning, everybody. John Sfiocla here for GAI Insights. Got a lot of interesting stuff today. If you want to follow along, go to gaiinsights.com/articles. We have Ankaj, Tim, and Paul. And we've got all kinds of news today. We've got a wonderful set of things around the articulation of context and what it means for development. We've got some either common sense or insight from the notion of vibe coding and other things. A couple of decent case studies. All right. Ankaj, if you could start us off with the first one.
Thanks, John. So the first one that we have for today comes from VentureBeat, and they talk about a new framework which simplifies the complex landscape of agentic AI.
I can't wait to hear Tim on this one, the new framework to simplify things. All right, go for it.
I thought it made things more complicated, so that was a problem for me. Man, you got to read this thing like 3 times before you can even begin to understand what it's saying. And I'm not sure what the point was, because I'm not sure there was really any decision framework attached to it, which is usually the point of a framework. Well, if I have a 2x2, then I have an upper right corner, and that's where I want to be, and I don't want to be in the lower left. And so I'm starting to build decisions and actions based on the framework. There was a little bit of that at the end here, but I thought this was optional. I thought it actually made things more complicated rather than less complicated.
All right. Interesting. What do you think here, Ankaj?
I was optional to important on this one, John. I think it sort of highlights what we have been seeing in the market where so there are 2 different things going on, right? One is models are being trained on RL environments where they are made to work agentically, and second is there whole lot of agentic tooling that is built around these language models. So what they suggest is that you should figure out a way to select one of those things, and we should not spend the entire sort of budget or compute on just training the models in this agentic behavior, right? So that was the takeaway for me from this one. But as Tim mentioned, they complicate things a lot. So it's not an easy read, or I think many people won't directly take this observation away from this one. So for that reason, maybe optional.
All right, Paul.
Yeah, and Ankaj, I don't understand. I guess maybe it's a matter of gradient or degree, but I can't imagine why you would start thinking about fine-tuning a model. For most people, that's not really a great option, especially to create a specialized agent, at least today. So for practical purposes. And the other is, I can't imagine building any agent that doesn't have some tooling. So the arbitrary distinction between doing something with the tooling versus doing something with the agent seemed artificial to me and probably not practical.
All right, Paul.
Yeah, definitely optional. It confuses it, and it just goes to my continued frustration of, the word AI agent is so broadly used. It's just confusing, folks. So let's talk about, this is like having a framework for subroutines and starting your thinking like that before you get into stuff. So optional. Let's go to the next one.
Yeah, I'm going to give it an optional. In terms of decision framework, Tim, at the very end, there's like a minor one, which basically says you progress through the different stages of this thing.
But I don't agree with it, because as I said, I don't think you can separate them that cleanly.
Yeah, there is a great. I'm all for partial rediscovery of stuff, but there are concepts and design approaches from traditional software that could really inform this thing. Anyway, all right, next.
Okay, moving on to the next one. This one comes from Microsoft, and it's a case study about how Bayer brings agronomic expertise to the edge with Azure AI Foundry.
Yeah, what'd you think, Ankaj? Just a little promotional activity here from our friends at Bayer and Microsoft.
Yes, John. So, John, basically what they are doing is they had a very specific use case where they were looking for crop protection labels, and their advisors were burning a lot of time doing that because these labels, they run into 100+ pages, and they tried using general purpose LLMs for that, but they weren't reliable enough. And so they fine-tuned a small language model on Microsoft Phi and Azure AI Foundry. and they were able to bring down the time that it took to do it manually from days or down to 10 seconds. So it basically shows a way that small language models, which are trained on domain-specific data and have branches built in, they can be used instead of the large language models. Uh, I was slightly skeptical about this one because I think the current set of large language models, maybe Opus 4.5 and GPT 5.2, they might be able to do this and they don't need to fine tune this stuff. So for that reason, I was between optional and important.
Yeah. Okay. Tim.
Yeah, I was mostly optional on this one. It's not a bad case study, but light again on the details, and so it's okay. I could be arm twisted into important, but it's not one of the best use cases we've seen. It's pretty light on the details.
All righty.
Also, I thought it was crazy that, again, this is like, this is done mostly for compliance, these enormous labeling things. And, my immediate thought was, well, why don't they reverse this and use the LLMs to generate all the compliance labeling and then have a human being create something that human beings could understand about how you actually use the product and what the interactions are. Just my thoughts.
Yeah. And Paul, where are you on this?
Yeah, optional.
Yeah, I was going to give it an optional. I think it's kind of light on, the evidence and so forth. In 1992, I wrote an article with Victor Doherty called Future Promise in Light of Current Practice, the Use of Expert Systems for the Adoption of Agricultural and Health Knowledge in Developing Countries. And yeah, I mean, the basic point, I think, is there. But there's so much more that they could do with this in terms of, anyway, we're going to give it an optional. Important area, not well reported. Next.
The next is a follow-up article to the one that we discussed yesterday about the trillion-dollar opportunity in context graphs, and this one talks about how to build a context graph.
Yeah, this actually goes, I think, deeper than simply building a context graph, right? I'm thinking of the wrong one. Tim, go.
Yeah, this is an interesting article. I would probably give this an important just because I think it's worth AI leaders giving it a read. I think there's a lot of stuff here that's been known before, but it's reasonably well articulated that most knowledge in an organization is tacit, that most of the problems that you incur are those of, as he calls it, context, and if you can do things to traverse the organizational dynamics, if you will, rather than just the data, then you can start to elucidate some of these dynamics of the processes and things of the organization. I think we were talking before, John, that we did these things called social network graphs back in the late 90s that had similar ideas, which is, hey, the context of an organization is largely about the conversations, and the power centers are largely about who the most conversations are with and how important they are. It was really following Google's page ranking system to a certain extent. But the idea was you can traverse the actual dynamics of the organization rather than asking who knows what about what. And you get a much more factual representation of what's going on. So that's all a good idea. Whether this is really practical for most people is another question altogether, because some tacit knowledge is very hard to elucidate just by tracing organizational structures, but there is a lot more information, so it's got some promise.
Yeah, so you can give it an important, you think?
I said important, yeah.
Yeah. All right, Akash.
I was important on this one as well, John. Like I mentioned yesterday, I think this is the next feature in all the agentic AI systems. These agents, they need memory, they need context to operate properly. So for that reason, important.
All right, Paul.
Important just because I think this is a topic needs to start getting on the AI leaders' radar screens, right? Up there with the world models and others. So important.
Yeah, let me make the case for essential. First of all, this way of thinking it's naive in a couple of. The idea that these models are allowing for the inductive discovery of important decision-making processes, contexts, and how you get there. That point of view really was explored deeply in the first wave of AI in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And there's a whole set of work from Carnegie Mellon and also from Stanford. Jim March and Sire wrote a book called Organizational Decision Making and created this notion of organizational programs using the metaphor of organization as computer. There's a tremendous amount of work that was done on how you think about organizations as decision-making processes and how computers change that. So, he's rediscovering a bunch of stuff that I think is well known out there. But I think this notion of simplifying the inductive process of having a conversation with a model as a way to define a real-world model now is cool. It's also hopelessly naive when it comes to organizational motivation, the exercise of power. It's got this quasi backdrop of rationalistic exercise of power in organizations, which is naive beyond measure, but typical techno whatever. But given all those caveats, I think this notion of two clocks, this notion of that LLMs are discovering the real world model of how organizations actually work, or at least the next best approximation, what that does and why it's important. I think that's a contribution to the current discussion. I went up, posted, some stuff to point back to some of the stuff that's 40 years old that's relevant. But so I was going to give it an essential because I think this is what 2026 is going to be about. I think it's going to be about organizations waking up and where it hit me like a ton of bricks is when ChatGPT asked me, "Hey, you want to have a conversation about our conversations for the year?" It's like, oh my goodness, and they were useful to me anyway. And and I have the conceit that I'm a long student of this stuff, and self-reflective, which are probably both bad conceits. But and I thought, wow, you can do this at the individual, the task, the organization level, the kind of stuff we wanted to do in the 1980s. Anyway, I was going to give it an essential. You guys going to complain about that if I do? I mean, do I have
I'll complain a little bit. My only complaint is that this is not truly a world model, and you have to be careful. No. So, because the original Smalltalk presentation to the Xerox executives was to ask them to build a simulation of their business, and they were completely uninterested. I think there's more interest today, but I think that's a better way to simulate your business. I think the idea of simulating your business is a great idea. I think doing it this way has a lot of risks that people don't realize. So it can work. Look, protein folding works with AlphaFold, even though we don't know how it does it, and it's not based on the physics of actual reality. And so that leads to problems. So it depends what you want. If you want to understand your business, like if you want to understand physics, this is dangerous, I would say, because it will lead you to potentially to conclude things that are not true, and you'll have evidence that they are true because you have a mechanistic model that produces an output in some cases. Yeah. And this is a common fault in science, is you have the wrong model, but it looks right. Like the ethers, went back in the day, it was responsible for all sorts of forces that didn't really exist until we got more down to the physics of electromagnetic radiation. So it depends what you want. If you really just want to try and get more of a handle on, that's why I thought it was important. At least thinking about these subjects is important. I'm a little nervous about saying, hey, this is the way to go, because I think it's not robust in the face of lots of stuff. And people will go down a rabbit hole of, hey, I've got this model of my organization and now I can make decisions. And then they break the organization and now they're pissed off at AI.
Well, look, it's hopelessly naive on its epistemology and exercise of power in organizations. I mean, I pointed him to Foucault and some of the others. I mean, look, Mark Zuckerberg continues to control Facebook. That's an exercise of power in the context of organization and decision making. He designed a monarchy, as did the guys at Google. And and you want to talk about organizational decision making. I mean, that's where it starts, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, those guys, even the shareholders can't say anything. So, like a lot of engineers, I don't know if they don't understand. They don't want to talk about power. I guess it's like, screen door in a submarine. It's not something you want.
Well, the most important thing is if you really want to simulate, you really want to be able to ask, what happens if I change this or that, and see the mechanics of what happens. Like, oh, this would improve my organization 50%, but it requires a suspension of gravity. Okay, well, that's not really useful. Okay, this doesn't give you that information. It says you can improve your organization, but it doesn't tell you if it's even remotely practical. So it's not a world model in the way I think of a world model. So it could get there, I guess, but
Yeah.
I
Well,
have trouble. Anyway, that's
yeah.
my 2 cents.
And the creation and extraction of value is intimately involved with power, and it doesn't talk about power at all. So,
And,
whatever.
John, I think another argument, at least for me, not making essential, I don't think this is useful yet to forward to other people in organization. It doesn't have a case study. I don't want the rest of the team starting to think about this yet.
All right, you have taken my youthful enthusiasm and buried it. So we are going for we are going for the important on this one. Next.
Okay, moving on to the next one. This one comes from LangChain, and it talks about FastWeb plus Vodafone transforming customer experience with AI agents using LangGraph and Langsmith.
Yeah, I was kind of on the fence between important and essential on this one. I mean, they're doing over 9 million, customer calls that they're dealing with this thing. This reminds me of a paper we did for Inflection, looking at the automation of call centers, and it's 90% right. I like the architecture in terms of, hey, we've got an inventory of problems, we got an inventory of solutions, we have a matcher, we have an evaluator. Very straightforward. The LangGraph case studies are usually abysmal, but this one I thought was pretty good. It had some economics, had some architecture, had the client in there. It's a huge issue, for tons of certainly telecommunications companies, but everybody. We've talked about customer service before, so it's not new news in terms of an area, but I thought it was kind of cool. Laid it out, had economics, so had architecture, had some process stuff. So even though it's a vendor case study, I thought it was at scale and interesting. So I don't know. I was between important and essential on this one. Certainly forwardable. Yeah, I would forward it to a couple of our folks. Paul was thinking about our friend in the promotional products businesses. Maybe it's like, hey. So anyway, that's where I am. So, all right, Humpty Dumpty's on the wall. Which way should I fall here, Tim?
I was said important. Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you said. It's a much better case study from these folks than we've seen before. It's reasonable. It's in production. It's still a little bit simplistic and light on a lot of the details, but it gets all the basics there. So it's a good intro. So I give it important. It's hard for me to give it an essential because they don't talk really in detail about how they deploy it, about how they evaluate it. There's lots of important things that are still left out here.
All right, Paul.
Yeah, I would at least want to note. I mean, the AWS case studies we like; those are vendor case studies as well. So I think I think the 9 million, John. I think that was just saying they have 9 million customers who have access to it. I didn't see any numbers that would show actually how many people are actually using this. Would have been useful here. So I had as important here. I think,
and they had no figures on their internal use. There was an internal use one too, which they didn't talk about at all.
Yeah. So from an architecture standpoint, I thought it was good. It was clean. It was easy to understand. It's case study. Customer service is an important one, as we've talked multiple times. So I had it as important.
Interesting. Yeah, it says currently serving 9.5 million customers through Customer Companion app. So I thought for sure Vodafone has a much bigger base than 9.5 million. So I thought that was actually the people served by this app.
No, I read that as a clever marketing. I mean,
Vodafone's probably got hundreds of millions, definitely tens of millions.
Why not say 9.5 million people have used the agent?
Well, it kind of does, but it's badly worded. Currently serving nearly 9.5 million customers through the Customer Companion app and voice channels. Anyway, it's
yeah, but it's a particular part of Vodafone, isn't it? Just the Italian part or something? It's not just Vodafone; it's Vodafone something or other.
True, could be either way. All righty, Akash, what do you think?
I was essential on this one, John. I think one is the outcomes that they have shared. And second, I think three things that they have shared here. So they are doing an orchestration using a supervisor agent and then sub agents. Then they're using a knowledge graph. Then the most important thing, I think everybody is struggling with this, which is the observability part of it. So they have an agent which is customer facing and it is taking actions on behalf of them. So it is very important to maintain that observability so that it doesn't do anything wrong. So for all those reasons, I think essential for me.
All right. I think it's a 2-2 tie. I think power of the chalk, baby. My vote counts more. I'm like
But,
Mark Zuckerberg. Huh?
but Akash, well articulated.
I hope not.
Yeah.
In the words of my Polish grandmother, he's done okay in this country. Okay. Next. Essentially, it is. Next.
Okay, moving on to the next one. This one is about vibe coding.
Akash, what do you think? A triumph of the obvious or insight worthwhile?
Triumph of the obvious, John. I think this doesn't have much to share with any sort of AI leader. Basically, they talk about how vibe coding helps in creation of code really faster and anyone can do it. But then they talk about the debt trade-off. That is, you need to spend a lot of time in maintaining all that code. So optional read this one, John. But I have a quick question. So we discussed the Andrej Karpathy tweet that I shared on LinkedIn as well, right? There was a follow-up tweet from Boris Cherny, who is the creator of Claude Code, and he is now promoting that he did around 200 commits in his code base through Claude Code, through vibe coding. So there's a huge difference between these two things, right? So how should we sort of think about this as we go into 2026? So is it that he is better at providing guardrails, providing instructions, planning the code, or do all vibe coders need to learn that so that there is no technical debt going forward? So how should organizations approach this?
Yeah, interesting. But one of the if we go down a little bit, the first graph in the upper left of the second page, I think the that guy, and their note is that none of the graphs were created by AI, but AI helped them with wording and stuff. Anyway, this to me seemed pretty obvious, which was the more vibe coding you do, kind of a decentralized, unsupervised manner, the more the technical debt is. I mean, yeah, well, don't do it in an unsupervised, unintegrated manner. But anyway, what do you think here, Tim? I bet you're going to say this is the solution, final solution.
Well, I think what this really does is exposes how fundamentally terrible most software is today and most architecture is today. So, I think we were talking before, if you take the bad practices of the last 40 years in which mostly we've just created a lot of bloat and a lot of bad software with a lot of problems and a lot of technical debt. And that's what the AI is trained on. And then you say, help me code something. That's what you're going to get with a lot of technical debt. So I think the use of vibe coding can be incredibly powerful. I wrote a little article on this last year if it's used as a user prototyping method. So the dream for us all back in the 70s and 80s was users create the prototypes and then professionals create the applications or the systems. And that model could be fantastic because you don't care how the prototype is built. What you really care about is that it expresses users' real desires directly. So if you could create an environment in which users can say, this is really what I want, and then that's so much better than a specification because there's an old great line from Steve Martin, and he was asked to like critique music or something like that, and he said talking about music is like dancing about architecture. And I feel the same way about UI. Talking about UI is like dancing about architecture. You can't talk about it. You have to see it and feel it and run it. And that's why iteration is so important. And it's been very difficult to create successful systems because you spend all this time talking about requirements and then you put the system up and it feels terrible to the user and it doesn't do what they want. So that's a great model. And that would be great for vibe coding. But when you start to take vibe coding and say, okay, I'll just take it right to production, that's a disaster because basically everything in production right now is a disaster. And if you just make it looser and trained on the disasters that currently exist, it's just going to be a bigger disaster. So I guess at the end of the day, I would say if you're a technical person, I would rate this important to essential as a lesson in what not to do. But if you're anybody else, I'd say optional.
All right, Paul.
Stay away.
Optional in terms of time.
All righty, I'm going to give it an optional as well. All right, Akash, next.
Okay, the next one comes from the Boston Consulting Group, and it talks about what happens when AI stops asking for permission.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, can I say one more time? And I'm gonna keep saying this. I hate this format they have where you scroll through and stuff gets in front of you. It's just like it's the worst.
Ditto.
It's like making text. It's hard to make text worse, but they did anyway. So God love them. But man, and I also hate articles like this. First of all, there's absolutely no new thinking in here, which is basically if you're going to give agents autonomy, make sure you test them. Right. That's what this says. I think. Uh, what I found really I think this dangerous to be too strong a word. I think that this is the wrong notion, which is I think you have to go from organizations to markets and from predictable problems to unknown problems and how you manage those. So when you think about giving agents capability, there are, you can imagine and simulate what might go wrong, but at the same time, you've got things that aren't going. It's going to create problems for you that you can't anticipate. So for me, if you're going to deploy agents with a lot of authority, you're going to have a new control mentality of not being able to test and predict and engineer out all the problems, but to be able to do as much of that as you can, but then to react to emergent problems that you can't anticipate. And that is a very different control architecture. And to basically say, hey, we can engineer, we can safely, give these agents a lot of stuff if we do enough testing, I think is hopelessly naive and really wrongheaded. I think that, so I just thought that the advice is bad, and that the conclusions are obvious within its bad frame. Other than that, I really liked it. Paul.
Yeah, Akash, if you can go to the very top, the summary of the article, I think it just reinforces your point, John. Agents add risk. We should understand how agents work. We should monitor them. So optional.
Yeah, I mean, the fundamental thing that's going on here is we're going from organizations to quasi-markets to markets, and how you exert control and safety in a quasi-market or a market is completely different for how you manage control and safety in the context of an organization. And so, whatever. Tim? Oh, sorry, Tim. I mean, Akash?
Triple optional, John.
All right.
Right there with you. Yep.
Okay. All right. Last one.
Okay, moving on to the last one, and this one is a big one. So Meta has bought AI startup Manus.
Jesus, I wish I had something to sell Mark Zuckerberg right now. He's so desperate to buy stuff. I actually thought this is a good move. I thought I think this article is essential. I think I have a friend who's over at LinkedIn, and for years, LinkedIn used to worry. The only competitor they really worried about was a non-competitor, which was Facebook. They thought that Facebook could launch Workbook, and compete because they had the social graph, and the social graph is very hard to capture. Google, I forget what was the Google entry for the social graph that failed. Anyway, Google didn't get there, but Facebook had it. So I think this thing of Manus, I think if they build behind this in terms of the ability to do, the kind of agentic planning and so forth that you do in businesses, and if they build other things that are aimed at Workbook, not Facebook, I think they can really make a go of it here. But anyway, I think it's super important to understand. But what do you think, Tim?
I think, as a business leader, you got to rate things like this essential. It's, Manus is one of those systems that's been probably below a lot of people's radar, but not ours. We've been talking about it from the beginning as a pretty good system, agent system. And I agree with what you said. This is what we said right from the beginning. At the end of the day, the big companies are going to gobble these companies up at outrageous sums of money because their currency is their stock. I mean, maybe they're paying cash, but they generate so much cash they can even do that. But between the cash and the stock, it's super cheap for them to acquire these companies economically, and much cheaper than trying to get their organization to produce them. So they're just going to gobble these things up.
Yeah.
Good for the guys at Manus. It is. I don't really know the provenance. I remember thinking it was a Chinese company, which could create some interesting situations. But but maybe not with this administration. I don't know. I would think this administration is so sensitive to China, they would look over it more, but they also tend to be very light on regulation and interference in deals. So we'll see.
Yeah, I also think, yeah, well, there are other ways to influence this administration that get interesting.
Yeah.
Ashish asked, why do I think this is good for their business? First of all, it's a trivial amount of dough to them, $2 billion to go do this. That they have a functioning capability. In terms of how it's aligned with their business, I think that a lot of people run their marketing off of Facebook, and a lot of medium and small businesses and so forth. And so I think it's going to deepen that once their user base understands this and what Manus can do in terms of planning and presentation and so forth. I think it gives them a product that will be very much of value to, what do they have, about 2 billion active users, $1.5 billion or something. I mean, of that.
Yeah, and I think people forget, for instance, that Facebook bought Instagram for an eye-watering amount of money back in the day, and then they bought WhatsApp. So it's not just Facebook too. If you look today at the Gen X's and Gen Yers, they are Instagram people, and that is a huge platform for advertising and marketing. And WhatsApp is rapidly becoming a critical tool for I think it's going to begin to compete with Slack, to tell you the truth. So they have these brands and power that they've acquired, and Manus will operate across all of them. And their current AI agent's kind of crappy, but they put a good one in there. It's going to really help. I think it's going to generate a lot of business for them. So you could have asked the same question when they paid. I can't remember what it was. It was over $1 billion for Instagram when they had like no
19.
revenue and 14 employees.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I don't know about Instagram. They paid $19 billion for WhatsApp, which is
WhatsApp,
about 20,
right? So they pay
about,
these, but again, they're generating so much cash, and again, if they use it, especially if they do a cash stock deal, the stock is currency, right? And it's worth so much right now that it's trivial for them to do these deals in terms of their balance sheet. So it makes a lot of sense. Even if they don't get full value, if they get something out of it, it's worthwhile.
Well, yeah. I mean, how much more advertising on Meta would global, let's just say the small and medium business market, the SMB market around the world, and they are a massively global company. The only places they're not are like South Korea and Russia, right? They're everywhere, and China, they're everywhere else. And how much incremental revenue would they have to get from those folks in the context of this? The other thing is that I'm wondering if you take the logic that Manus has put together, and now you start to do context and storylines and all that other stuff. So you take the Manus, agentic processes, and you put them onto, different interaction points with Facebook, whether it's the family reunion, whatever the heck it is. I got to believe, it's going to drive. Plus, 2 billion.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Hey, we want to get together and have a party or a get together somewhere, a golf outing or a family reunion. Oh, I can help you do all the planning, right? I can do all the booking. I can do everything for you, right?
Right, and it's visual and it works. Anyway, Akash, what do you think?
Yep.
I think this is an essential read, John. I think the last point that you mentioned about the agentic AI part of it, I think that's really important. So if we see the last few announcements from Manus, they were related to agentic AI, context engineering. They have their very good deep research agent. Now, recently, they were able to use Nano Banana to edit presentations as well. So they are doing a lot of stuff which falls into the agentic category. And I think Facebook has acquired, or Meta has acquired them just for this reason, because Meta already have the models, right? So we have discussed the segment anything model from them. It's a video segmentation, audio segmentation as well. So they have all the pieces. They were not able to bring them together. And I think the Manus team will help them bring that together. So essential news, I think, from a Meta perspective.
What do you think here, Paul?
Yeah, just a few things, Ed. At a conference, I did the 50 hours of work in 5 minutes. And what I wanted to do was have one prompt that says, analyze the industry and present a output in McKinsey-like format. And the only tool that could do that at the time was Manus AI. So they continue to be a lot of people are skeptical because it came out of China, but this one got moved to Singapore. Benchmark, which is a VC firm in California, did it. So it's a potential way for like the hyperscalers have some of the Chinese open source models in their data center for startups that go through that. Third on price, it's a startup. They're doing $100 million. So this is 20 times revenue in terms of $2 billion purchase price. That isn't crazy. And then last thing I would just share is, John, I agree on the small business stuff. There is a tremendous amount of small businesses that super rely on Instagram. It used to be Facebook, now it's Instagram, and automating that is going to be a natural for that. And Zuckerberg continues to show a really shrewd way to keep breaking things. He went from open source to closed source. He bought scale. He hired $100 million engineers, and now he sees another young team that's doing well, and he acts. So it's decisive entrepreneurship there. So, but for AI leader, I think the key thing here is AI leader. This is yet another way potentially get unbelievable technologies come out of China into the U.S. Distribution system.
Yeah, it's interesting. Being the grandson of immigrants who are from countries that got run over on a regular basis, Poland, Lithuania, Scotland, and Ireland. I'm a little cynical here because you look, Benchmark comes in at $500 million in April. They exited $2 billion. I think they're the only American capital in there. If I'm the Chinese and I want to infiltrate U.S. tech companies, this is a beautiful way to do it, right? Facebook buys them for $2 billion, which is not, I think, is a cheap price for them. And so, but Benchmark's okay because they made 4x their money in 9 months. Benchmark gets them into the American ecosystem. They liquidated $2 billion, so everybody's kind of happy. But now the Chinese are deep in Facebook in terms of its interactions and on a global basis. So
why, John? Because Zuckerberg's going to let Chinese get all over Meta's code now?
Well, how will they know?
Well, they know. I just think
these guys are pretty good.
They're pretty good, and even
why we worry about them.
Yeah, everybody makes money. The Chinese state has a backdoor to the, when you think about it in terms from an intelligence perspective, if I'm the Chinese, what do I want to be in? I want to be in Google. I want to be in Amazon. I want to be in Facebook, and I want to be in Apple, and I want to be in Microsoft.
Right.
So this is one of the 5 biggies. And, I just, this.
So I understand. So the employees are spies then for the Communist Party, or the Communist Party have backdoors?
No, just the way. No,
they have backdoors. They have hidden code that allows state actors in China to get in. This is what they do all the time.
Look, MCI had, for the U.S., had a truncation point for international calls back in the 80s. They had 85% of international call truncation coming into the U.S. They used that to spy on all the calls that were going in and out of the United States on an international basis. The reason AT&T couldn't respond to MCI's friends and family offer, which was killing AT&T, was because they used the security agencies to push back against the Justice Department, even though they had 85% market share of international calls, and they let the spy agencies tap into that. So you tell me stuff like that's not going on with the Chinese? Of course it is. Anyway, I don't know that. Look, I'm not an intelligence guy, and I don't know, but they will find a way. So.
Okay.
Regardless.
So Facebook has been suckered on this. Do you think the wolf in the hen house?
I don't think Facebook cares.
I don't think Facebook cares. I think that if you look at their political background, they don't care as long as it makes them money. And so, the question is,
make them a lot of money.
And I think the current administration is fine with our major. I mean, look at what they're doing with NVIDIA. I mean, the current administration is fine with them showing up to the Chinese. So, exactly. She says even the talent would infiltrate the U.S. mainstream. Absolutely. So, look, if I'm sitting there and I'm the Chinese and I want to do what I do is I go give a good offer, $250 million. Okay, think about the April price for Benchmark, $250 million. That company was worth a lot more than $250 million back then, right? In April, and now you let them in and exit at $2 billion right after. Come on.
Well, so as an AI leader, what does that mean? I should not buy any Google or Meta product because they have employees that might be agents for China?
No, but I think that
I don't. Yeah, you don't have a choice.
Yes.
I mean, again, we're all in this web, and you don't have a choice because these firms are countries. They're nation states. They have so much control. You can't buck what Meta and Microsoft and Apple do. You have no choice.
So
doesn't mean it's great.
for
but
her, does
huh?
this mean anything? Yeah.
For the AI leader.
No,
I
the
think
AI leader needs to know about this because they need to expand their radar a little bit. To me, this is more about the news than we're talking about deeper issues, right?
Right.
The for the AI leader, this is just about another one. Like you don't want to be stopped in the hallway and asked about this and start flubbing your lips, right?
Yeah, that's all. I
You
look,
just got to
and
know this is a fairly significant move, and you got to have something to say.
yeah. Anyway, yeah, the
And it's an issue. It's to the AI leader. It's I need to know about Manus, the Manuses of the world. I don't need to know about every company. There's 500 bazillion of them out there, but this company's been in the press. It's been well reported for over 6 months now, which is in dog years a long time in this market, and you just need to be aware of that stuff.
Yeah.
They may be using it, and many organizations are using this, even if they're not aware of it. Again, it's the shadow IT thing where people find out about Manus. They say this thing is pretty good. I'm going to go use it.
Yeah. Anyway, so back to your question, Paul. I completely agree with Tim. It's about the it's about the nature of the news, and then this deeper issue, of which I personally don't have a lot of insight into, but I am skeptical of what's going on here. Okay, Akash, we could give us a tote board. Paul, announcements.
Yeah, a couple announcements. We'll be off the news Thursday and Friday this week for the New Year's. Second is that John did a fantastic overview of 2026 predictions. You can come to the GAI Insights, search for GAI Insights on YouTube and find that. And third, we'll not have a ChatGPT pre-training on this Thursday because we're off.
All righty. Have a great one, everybody. See you all tomorrow for the end of year, and have a great AI day. Bye-bye now. Thank you,
Super.
Akash, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Bye-bye.